Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're good. Oh, I always when this little frame thing's not on, I always feel naked. Where's that little frame thing? Very exposing without it. There we go. That's better. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Hope you're good. Really been looking forward to this. It's been an interesting topic that we've needed to get stuck into. Something that's been raised a few times over the years. We've covered it then, but it's certainly, and also I think it's been. As topics go, our version of this conversation is something that we've had on Chewing It Over a number of times. Not necessarily event specific, don't get me wrong, but fascinating things that are, I think, Physio and MSK's version of a wider cultural conversation that I think is important, and we should cover off, recognise where it is a wider discussion, but also what is going on in our corner of it. And so I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into this today with Evie Martin and Sue Julians. Unfortunately, Liz Prokopowicz can't join us. She was going to be, she was the third hand that was raised when I invited this discussion, and she unfortunately can't make it, but no doubt we'll hopefully be able to bait Liz onto future shows. She's been on Chewing It Over before, and I know you all loved that episode about her recent blogging on not dissimilar topics, which is great. So we'll get her thoughts, no doubt, in time. Please let me know, as usual, whether or not you can hear okay. I've got Evie and Sue loitering in the lobby there. They don't seem to be making a mess. Hope they're enjoying the snacks I left out. But give us a thumbs up if you can still hear us okay. Yep, good. So then it's just up to you lot to let me know whether or not you can hear me, and we'll get cracking and bring them in to the show. And hopefully in a few clicks, so I need to get shut of that. And then hopefully Sue and just double clicked Sue. There we go. Right, okay, we're in. Can you hear me okay still?
Yes.
Yeah, we're good. Right, so what I fancy doing to start off with, if that's okay, Evie, is you begged the question, as you do brilliantly on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. Admittedly, I then said, honestly, let's go there, but just let me get Therapy Live actually out of the way, if that's okay. And so we kindly scheduled it for now. But just tell us a little bit about what you found and also why you felt it was worth chatting about.
Well, I mean, I guess I saw, it caught my eye immediately when I saw the Therapy Live agenda come out. And I was just looking at it going like, oh, seriously, like most of us in physio are women. How can it be that there are so few women at Therapy Live, to my eye anyway? And I was kind of going, oh, here we go again. Like this, it's the same thing we see over and over again. So I thought we might as well raise it again and try to get to the bottom of it. I thought I was planning to just actually start this by reading out this message that I got from a guy, a physio. And I think this kind of sums up a bit of what we're trying to be about. I'm going to read it out. Is that all right?
Of course it is. Yeah, I'm nervous what it says.
I know, it's absolutely lovely. I won't say who it is. He'll know, if he sees this or if he's listening. He goes, what an extremely sensitive and complex topic, which needs thrashing out between people who can be open and honest without judgment, which will never happen on SoMe. Because it would be so stressful for anyone to discuss this topic in fear of sounding either like a chauvinistic prick or a brow-waving contrarian at any second. The cultural complexity of this topic is fascinating, and I would love to discuss this over pints. I do my best, but I'm a white male from XYZ. This shit is so unconscious at times, it's scary. And then he goes on to say, I have 4 sisters, 3 sister-in-laws, a daughter and a wife. My mum was my biggest influence on how I behave, so I'm always interested in this topic. Sorry for the rant, but this tweet caught my eye and I felt I needed to say something to you.
How interesting. Well, no pressure, eh?
I just thought I think that kind of sums it up because, I mean, to my eye anyway, there is a bit of a problem. I think there's something wrong that 19 out of 100 sessions were by women only at Therapy Live when 75% of our profession is women.
So that's one of the things that then
I just want to
on the stats, because that's the thing that was interesting about what your numbers were, because obviously we at a glance we were surprised at your numbers because you've gone for who is speaking solo, and you felt that because you've explained since as to why you feel that was actually because we looked at en masse, and that's obviously because we aggregate that because our panel discussion.
Come here, Jack. I did it that way just because it was the quickest way. I could look at it and count women.
Yeah, I can do
it. There were like 100 sessions. So I think we found out later, and according to later on, we saw that.
I can pull these up.
Yeah. Later on, we saw that. Yeah, So 39% of the people speaking at it were women. I mean, it's an interesting one. There's two things going on here, I think. There's why were 75% of the people invited not women? And then there's why did a lower percentage of women accept? So there's like these two different things kind of going on. But I don't know. I mean, like, what, the other question with all this is like, is it definitely a problem? Like when I saw that therapy live, it sort of just gave me a bit of a, oh no, like this, there's something wrong here. But like with you, like Jack, what did you like? Do you think there's a bit of a problem here, or do you think it's something we should be concerned about? Like, what are your kind of feelings on it as such?
I think the statistics mask a problem. I think the statistics are a really funny way of thinking that gives you any conclusions. I think that people that overdraw from the statistics sometimes are making the mistake we wouldn't make elsewhere, which is drawing causation from correlation sometimes. And I think that that's a mistake. I'll definitely go into that in a little while and a bit deeper, so I'm not going to dodge that in full, but I do want to bring Sue in, because I just want, Sue, your sort of opening thoughts on the topic, because you kindly threw your hand up when I suggested we should discuss it further. So I just wondered if I could just invite your comments on the topic, as well as getting stuck into your answer, Evie, in a second.
I guess my initial reaction was we need to think of all the reasons why this doesn't happen. It can't just be, I'm not a big fan of quotas, because I think if you force quotas on people, they find independent silos out with that. You end up having, what you want is the women you want to hear speak to speak. You don't want any woman to speak. And that's an old-fashioned view. At the moment, the trend is very much against that. But I think there are barriers as well that we need to look at. You look at, for example, how many people come into the profession and how many people get to senior positions, and do you need to be at a senior level to be able to speak? So is this 75% of the profession being female, only female at the junior levels? Are they getting to be senior enough clinicians and academics in order to be, you want to hear them anyway? And if not, where are the barriers to that career progression, to putting you into a place that people want to hear you anyway, and you've got something worthwhile to say? And then you've got the situation where, as Evie quite rightly said, that you have a lot of women being asked who said no. And if you look at your figures slightly differently, Jack, where if 87% of the men you invited said yes, 67% of the women you invited said yes. If you managed to get that 67% of women, now I've taken those figures and slightly looked at them differently.
Yeah,
okay?
I did the same. Yeah.
If you managed to persuade, if 87% of the women you asked said yes, you would have had 76 women speaking at Therapy Live. If you had quoted the invites as 50% men and 50% women, with only 67% saying yes, you would only have 71 speaking. So it's not a question of asking an equal number, or it is in some way, but you've got to persuade them to say yes as well. So what can we do to make that happen? Is it like a couple of people said, elevate the people you want, promote the people you want. So if you get asked and you feel that somebody's better, persuade that person, mentor that person to be confident enough to stand up. And those are some of the areas which I think are more interesting.
So there's a few things that have happened over the years, this is not our first rodeo in this space, really. And therefore, we have got several different policies in place to try to account for some of the variables as we see it. Part of the analysis, like you said, Sue, and I'm forever saying it, probably at least every other show I mentioned, getting all the cards on the table. So this is no different. So there's one thing that I want to make sure I don't be seen to duck, really, is that I think that even if there was parity of parity of invites, or in this case, 75% of the invited were women, in keeping with the profession. Let's just say that was the case. I think it would be remiss of me as an event organizer to then say, well, we asked, and as if I then check out of that conversation there. I think it's remiss if we did that, because there's something to do with sort of the culture and the circumstance of which that invite is framed, the language of which that invite is made, from which pool, from how accurately are we then placing any of the invitees into the program. So I definitely want you and the audience to know that I don't shy away from us having some responsibility beyond an invite. But then to come to your question specifically, Evie, because I didn't want to duck it, but I did just want to get Sue's opening points. Is I'm going to kick over what is the biggest landmine on this topic, typically for me, having been there before, been to much more contentious issues than this, by the way, on and off air. But the big one for me is that when you're looking at raw statistical data like this, it's not raw, but it's like you were aggregating numbers. Then I think that the differences between the data groups is relevant in any given time. And I am someone that is bold enough to say that I think there are far more relevant similarities, but there are relevant differences between men and women on a biopsychosocial and many other metrics that then somewhat will play out in any data set. Now, that therefore doesn't mean that you then throw your hands up and say, well, nothing can be done therefore, as if that's an inevitability. But I think that on the mean, there are dispositional differences in personality that might well mean that there are likelihood of acceptance of an invite. We've been on this show talked a lot about imposter syndrome, including on the show at Therapy Live, that can then therefore sometimes affect women more than men in some instances. And there are various reasons as to why. But then when those things are in play, which is contentious in and of itself, but I'm admitting is a position I hold, then that is something that might well play out in the data. And so one of the things that you asked is there a problem at all? Is that I think there is. I think there are several different types of a problem, and there's definitely stuff that we need to try to aspire to solve. But I think that the statistics don't get as close to it. In fact, I think they can disrupt. I think they can be, if they are part of what is being considered in an analysis, fine. But sometimes they are seen as being a conclusion we need to aspire to. And I think that is a classic place that some people hide. I think there are some conference organizers that hide behind that. Look at our statistical parity when actually it's corrupt underneath. And I know our processes and I know how robust they are, and I would defend them against that policy, whereas actually it's been implied by many that is sort of the holy grail. And I just disagree with that.
Like I'll just respond there. I think what you're explaining there, I suppose, is the difference between, or the reason for that 20% difference in accepting the invitation between men and women. Like Sue pointed out there that 87% of men accepted the invitation, whereas only 67% was it of women. Yeah, so there was that 20% difference. So I suppose, if you're talking about differences in interests and dispositions between the sexes, then maybe we could explain that 20% difference by that. But the question of, I suppose, I think maybe where there might be more responsibility for course organizers or whoever might be in just the actual number of people invited. So again, to keep going back to, if you have a profession that's 75% female, why are 45% of the invitees female? And I think maybe Sue is definitely onto something there with the idea that there are more men in senior positions, maybe in the profession in general. So I think part of, it's only that difference in acceptance of the invitation probably comes down to a difference in.
I would say though that my point wasn't just on the acceptance of invitation. My point is on the dispositional difference in personality and their aspirations and ambitions that might well play a part in the fact that you've got those career progressions as to why. It's funny instance because me and my wife are both extremely extroverted at the top 90 percentiles and have got various different similarities. But one of our relevant differences is that she just could not be asked to do half of the stuff that I do, and is amused at the fact that would be seen as a downside. That she makes those decisions, and that is then seen. The fact that why is it that that metric is something that should be lauded? It should for some people, and it's great, but not everyone aspires in that direction, and that's okay too. And she's still an incredible careerist woman, as well as mother, as well as the complexity around her person. That means that just because she doesn't go on the internet and do what I do, means that why is that judge metric being relevant? So that has meant that affects even the position that everyone is within their careers, and that might then play out in gender statistics. But anyway, Sue, I just wanted
I just want to come back on something that you said about the differences in male and female characteristics. I think we have to acknowledge that testosterone plays a part in the aggressive way in which men take opportunities that are given to them. However, we also have to accept that social conditioning of females is completely different. And if when you take your wee boys to buy clothes, you'll notice it more than anything else, that wee boys' shoes, even 2 years ago, were called Leader. The wee girls' shoes are called Princess. Right. You're constantly, all the way through your childhood, and my girls are now 11 and 13 years old, you see it time and time and time and time again, that boys are meant to lead. And this leads to another thing, in that I feel that that male characteristic of aggression is massively overvalued. I'd rather work with women who are generally socially conditioned to be more collegiate, more thorough, more worth listening to when they do get a chance to speak. So although I accept that there are differences within the sexes, they're partly conditioning and they are partly natural. And actually, female characteristics, or those that are deemed to be female because everybody can have them, are massively undervalued.
It's interesting. Your thoughts on that, Evie?
Well, I think that in terms of the fact that differences are socialized, and we see sort of different males and females modeling different behaviors and stuff, I think Therapy Life is actually quite a good example of this. I mean, if my daughter is a physio, and if the profession is still 75% women, I'm not going to love her being at a conference that's 92 men, 58 women, in a profession that's 75% female. Like, I think that it's sort of a bit of a catch-22. Like, that's not great female representation either, which is maybe going to affect how women physios, I don't know, perceive what they can do later on.
Yeah, I definitely have had
kind of a bit of a vicious cycle. No, you're grand.
There's a bit of a lag there. I wasn't meaning to interrupt. Sorry, carry on.
No, you're grand. Like, in terms of just, I suppose I've been thinking about this. Like, is it that women, do women take fewer opportunities? Is it? I mean, I was looking at my own figures, for this Physios Online. I have this project, Physios Online. It's sort of the hobby thing. It's a collective of physios, and in that, like, these are all independent physios. Most of them are musculoskeletal physios. It's the same sort of group that you'd expect. It's sort of a Therapy Live physio conference type thing. And over 70% of those, there's 137 people registered on that website now. And 97 of those are women. So it's not a thing that women physios are not coming forward or putting themselves out, or I don't know. It's not just that. But
the difference is you're running it. You're running it as a woman. And so you're going to communicate in a different way. And I think there's a lot to be said for we want the women to run the conferences too, because they do go about this in a different way.
I think that's definitely something that I want to... Sorry, I keep doing this. I've got a bit of a delay, so I think I keep jumping in too late. I think I've had continue to have an ongoing conversation, particularly with my friend Leanne Antoine, about some of this stuff around role models. We find it really fascinating to riff on this intermittently, often off air, of course, but we have done it on air a bit as well, about the specificity of role modeling and stuff like that, and how we can see routes forward. Because what you've mentioned there, Evie, about the fact that then, is it a catch-22 whereby you've then got a conference that then doesn't have an appropriate either gender parity or isn't gendered in keeping with the profession, of which, by the way, it's interesting because Therapy Live isn't Physiotherapy Live. And so one of the things that we're sometimes doing is we're taking not just profession-wide statistics, but we're taking CSP member statistics. So physiotherapists, last I've done with sample data, so it's a bit backward, but state registered physios in the UK that are non-CSP members are overrepresented male. So you've got an interesting thing there.
Right.
So when you use CSP data, you inflate that, especially in MSK. But equally, my data is not super robust there because we've done sampling data on our audience over time. But yeah, non-CSP state registered physios in the UK, you have more males than certainly 25%. So there's a few different factors there that sometimes play. But and we can talk about why that might be. It's another show. But what I think is what I wanted to talk about with regards to role modeling is that the organizer being male, in this instance, program design, it falls to me and Jim, typically, and so you've got two blokes there. I think that one of the interesting pieces that kind of Sue touched on is then you've got that off the back of 8 years of culture that we've then perpetuated as a brand as Physio Matters, which people have sometimes then said, sometimes in compliment and sometimes as an accusation and criticism, is that we have a sort of a banterous tone to it that's been, again, you have to indulge stereotype to call that male, in my opinion. But generally speaking, that's kind of what has been suggested, is that some have accused it even being then maybe that's the hostile environment to women that you've managed to perpetuate, which obviously mortifies me if that's the case. But some have suggested it. But I think that what I find to be really interesting about this conversation, not just this one, but I mean the wider topic that I'm really keen on your thoughts on, so I'll spit it out eventually, is that I can't comprehend personally me acting both consciously and subconsciously in male self-interest when I'm surrounded by women that I love. Like, I find that really fascinating. Now, of course, there's then, do I value certain traits that then might be sort of symbolically masculine or considered, we've been socialized to perceive them to be masculine? Look, there's something there. But generally speaking, for wife, mother, two sisters, amusingly both in engineering, by the way, you've then got a friendship group that's inevitably mixed both by couples, etc. And it just feels so interesting then that sometimes we then think, well, if the people that ran it would be picking out more female names, I think, when I look at our team and I think about the contributions that were made by females onto that program, is it ends up being gendered in a similar way. Our advanced practice stream, for example, led in its program design by a woman. They're very similar statistics. Similarly, if Felicity was more in her role in the team, happened to be more closely linked to program design, do we end up with more females either in the invite list or the acceptance list? We'll run that experiment, trust me, and to some extent we have in the past. But I just don't know. Underneath this, philosophically, we have got this perception that you've got me acting on male self-interest, Evie acting on female self-interest.
That's not what I'm trying to say, though.
Maybe not you, but some are suggesting.
Yeah, okay. So what I think, I suspect that a big part of it is women who may be a little bit shy to put themselves forward are less intimidated when another woman asks them, because they see it's a woman asking them and they think, well, they're doing it, so it must be okay. And there's a certain amount of trust, whether deserved or not deserved. And particularly, I mean, I know you, Jack, and you'll have seen from the comment I made on Evie's thread, is I know that you elevate women. You asked me. I didn't want to do it. I was nervous as hell. Even the first time I came on your show, I thought I had nothing to say. What have I got to say? I'm only just, 30 years qualified and run my own business and have an MSc and do you know what I mean? I didn't.
You should be running the show. That's what I've said.
I was really horribly nervous about it, and it got me outside of my comfort zone. And I thought, oh, actually, that wasn't too bad. But I think that women may be more likely to take a leap of faith if it's another woman asking them, and that's not your fault or anything you can do anything about. And perhaps you might get Felicity to ask a few of the women who've been reluctant to do it and see what happens, and see if people have more trust because there's a woman involved. I don't know. I mean, that's equally sexist in a slightly different way, but that might be part of the reason.
That's what when I hear this idea of like, I don't know, like the idea that to get more women out of Therapy Live, what you need to do is give them loads of support and caring. You just need to be a bit more fluffy and soft with them. I don't know. No. I see this kind of thing. It just kind of, I'd be like, here, come on now. Like, I think that maybe if the focus was squarely on ensuring that a high enough number of women are actually invited, I think that the responsibility of the organisers of really any event, I don't know how much further it goes beyond actually giving the woman that opportunity and inviting them to speak. I know this might be a bit, I'm so controversial, but I don't, but, you know, I'm kind of going like, if you ask me to do something, if I'm suffering from some kind of crippling imposter syndrome or whatever, I don't know how much that's really your responsibility, Jack, now to sort
no,
of,
that's really not what I was saying. I was saying that I wouldn't expect the woman to change their behavior because she's asking a woman. I'm just saying that there might be instinctive trust. I'm not saying you need to butter them up or anything.
No, but I know,
I just think there is that kind of difference.
There probably is. Yeah.
I think there's one of the things as well, by the way, Sue, me and Evie have both done it, whereby just because there's a corner of your point that then others have made, you know, we're kind
I see. I was like, well, so, that's not what I meant.
No, we're not meaning to misrepresent you, because I think we're all on a fairly similar page, actually. I think that probably what we're doing is we're inviting, like, we've all heard a lot of various different voices that we're trying to welcome into the conversation and represent their points. And I think that where I want to invite a new variable, I guess, is that we've just put these statistics up, which are yeses and nos, accept and decline, and the invite stats and stuff, and we can be and should be scrutinized on those. Let's make those public. I think Evie did post them, but I'm happy to and stuff, and I'll attach them to this thread. But what I wanted to invite is that if we did what you're describing, Evie, the statistics would be a mess, because we get massive amounts of maybes.
Oh,
from women.
Women are very likely to say maybe, are they?
We get very few. Fortunately, we get very few no's from everyone, which is lovely. But we get very few male maybes. It's yes or no, and we hope that the no's in this instance are because of, you know, usually the reasons that they give is just, you know, time clashes, etc., and things like that. But yeah, we get a lot of maybes. Now, what do you do with maybes, right? What we do with maybes, this is what I mean about these internal policies, is our maybe, when we get a maybe, is we offer a clarification piece on context. Why we asked you particularly, what commentary we've been valuing of yours, why it is we've associated you to that topic, why often you were first name on the team sheet in that direction. We try to offer that qualifier as a means of, and we've got to be careful with that, because we don't want to apply excessive pressure as if we're trying to guilt trip them into saying yes, you know. So it's a fine line we try to do, but we try to do it, and we do it at a time expense that I make sure that we're fighting any urge that might emerge sometimes, particularly when we're under the cosh time-wise. I'm fighting any urge within the team or within us to say, oh, sod it, we can't add that admin to our caseload. So that's what we do, and if, therefore, I'm quite pleased with that policy as it stands, because I'd be fearful of just how bad the statistics, according to this metric, the statistics would look if we took those maybes as no's.
I think they might look something like as bad as, I remember back in March we had a thread about, I posted something about how there aren't many women on podcasts, physio podcasts in particular, and a podcast host that you probably know who, you know, got back to me saying that I think they'd invited 25 women, and some amazing number, like I think it might have been 19, just never responded. So like it's that, whereas I think they invited 50 men or 51 men, and all 50 out of 51 had accepted the invitation. So
I really enjoyed that thread, because someone had said, a couple of women had said, I've got better things to do. I love it, you know, because that's part of it. There's a factor at play, though, isn't it?
Bath and the kids, yeah.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, I think everybody carves their own niche, and you find success in your own ways. And if less women are comfortable doing this, they find success in other ways, you know. So I was never going to be one of the people that would be going down to the pub with all the consultants, because, you know, it felt too boysy for me, and also, you know, I had children and all that kind of stuff. So you know, my best professional relationships on getting work are with human resource departments of companies, which are predominantly women. You know, so you find a way to succeed within this patriarchal environment, if you like.
It's interesting, yeah. I mean, I'm conscious of time. I don't know if you guys. I'm happy to go another 5 if you guys are available. Is that
Happy.
Is that okay? Because I do want to bring in the comments. I didn't realise that time had got away from us. I've been a terrible host, which is one of the reasons why I shouldn't really do this show, and Sue should be running it. But we'll come back. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. So there's some really interesting comments. So let me just pick a bit of a sample. We've got some agreement here from Joe Turner, who recently did a podcast on not dissimilar topic on You Matter with some women about Evie's last provocation in this space. And I know Evie's on You Matter soon. But she agrees with Sue that feminine traits are a fantastic basis for leadership, whether displayed by a man or a woman. And that's the thing, when people talk about that, feminine traits, we've got to be careful because we're not necessarily indulging stereotype. We're just meaning that symbolically and classically socialized and associated feminine traits, which is a mouthful. There's some points here that speaks to what you both sort of wondered and mentioned. Is this what you were concerned about, Evie? About the fact that, isn't it rather sexist to prefer to be invited by a woman than a man? Like that mattering was a concern for you?
No, not that specifically wasn't a concern for me. It sort of seems natural enough to me that if a woman invites you to do something, maybe it's sort of, yeah, it seems not weird at all to me that there might be a higher chance of you saying yes.
Okay.
What I was concerned about a kind of a different thing. I can't remember what it was.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
I just wondered because you'd said about how it felt intuitive, if you felt like you had to be dead gentle or caring and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, no, that was like referring to in general. So let's say yourself and Jack are trying to get some people onto Therapy Live, and you look at Sue and you say, okay, we're sending this to Sue now. We're going to have to make sure that we're very supportive and let's take good care. Like that kind of vibe, that really idea nice. Of that, take account of her femininity and all that. Like it, and I don't think that's the intention behind some of these comments, but it does. Sometimes it
can go that way, can't it? Though that's a good point. Yeah. And the music. I mean, we're laughing our heads off because, of course, that's a surefire way of Sue saying "piss off, you condescending prick."
Yeah, well, exactly.
It's a little bit, yeah. So that's what more what I meant by that. Yeah.
David Zalek, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name there, David. It's all about choice, conference speakers, effort. For me, it's not about gender. He feels that the statistics don't play out because of that, but because of other dispositions. Joe's reflecting on the maybe question. I want to, tell me more, talk to me. Me and Joe have spoken about this before. It's one of the things that's informed our policy as we do it as conference organisers is to make sure we lean into those maybes. But I will admit that is a really interesting thing that emerges. And I wish if we hadn't kept good enough statistics for me to probably give you or what constitutes a maybe. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so I will look a bit closer into it if I can. But it's kind of some of them are a yes, but, and some of them are a kind of soft nose that we turn into maybes. So it's a bit variable. I will admit.
I think those stats are really great, Jack, and the kind of thing that you sent today, because it's like I said on Twitter, it's a very, very different conversation when you see a conference that seems to have far too few women. It's easy to jump to the conclusion, oh no, here's another example of sexism. Yeah. Whereas actually there might be, really a lot more going on there. And I think that's sort of revealed in statistics like what you've been showing us. So.
This is a great comment from I think if it's indeed the Karen McCreesh, then one of our speakers who's also then doing a re-record tonight at 8 o'clock. So on Physio Matters Facebook, here's a chance to advertise. Physio Matters Facebook, 8 o'clock tonight. Karen McCreesh, Kevin Cuppins, and Andrew Jaggi. Research priorities in shoulders.
Oh, brilliant!
That session got missed at Therapy Live because of tech issues and because their moderator didn't turn up. Me, because I couldn't get on. Right, so I was struggling with the technology, even my end. So that didn't happen. So we're re-recording it at 8 o'clock tonight. So if that is, I assume it's the Karen McCreesh. It's a brilliant, lovely comment, and thank you, Karen, for joining us today. She said, if women are less experienced as speakers due to fewer opportunities, then maybe there is a need for mentoring. I'm not saying conference organisers have to take that role, but maybe there are experienced presenters of any gender that would be willing to, and then just to finish that off, would be willing to step up and do that. I would. So I assume it is the Karen McCreesh, and what a great opportunity for anyone to lean into Karen's skill set, because I think that would maybe take the edge off a little bit, wouldn't it, if we had that ability to bring that next generation through as up and comers.
Well, that would be a nice thing if you have a maybe that you could ask the Joe Turner questions to, but also then put them in touch with somebody who has spoken before, perhaps somebody who was willing to collaborate and just reassure them, then that would be a good way of going about it.
Absolutely lovely. Well, thank you so much, especially for this little extra 5 minutes I've just grabbed of your time. And obviously the conversation goes on. One of the things I was realizing that I might have been come across as if I was doing when it got raised, I wasn't saying, okay, let's allocate 30 minutes to that and only 30 minutes ever, and we'll solve the problem. Of course not what I was bringing. I was just inviting this as another platform to discuss what is an interesting topic. Thank you, Evie, for raising it. Thank you, Sue. And of course, to Liz, who couldn't join us, for throwing your hands up, as many others did. And the conversation goes on, of course. And so I've enjoyed it. It's been a whistle-stop tour, but we'll chat again, no doubt. Thank you both.
See you.
Cheers. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.